Hello and welcome to the full-term results reporting for XP Power. It's been an interesting year, not least because we now have Gavin Griggs, who was the CFO, who has stepped into the shoes of Chief Executive following Duncan Penny's announcement that he's to retire in April after 20 years with the business.
Yes, we switched roles on the 1st of January and he leaves the business on the 20th of April.
Well, good luck with that, because you're joined, I'm sure, very ably by Johan Olivier. You're the acting CFO at the moment. Welcome to the business, and we're going to be getting some top-line figures from you in a moment. But first, Gavin, in your CEO role, the tradition is to give us an opening kind of statement on the top lines during what has been for many businesses a really tough year, but I just sense you've actually been doing pretty well.
Yeah, we had really strong performance in 2020. I mean, it was almost a story of two halves. The first half we had really strong COVID-related orders, and in the second half we delivered them to customers. And the other backdrop is the strength of the semi-fab market all through 2020. So we've come out with some very, very strong financial performance ahead of expectations.
And I think we're going to talk in a bit more detail, but you've kept your delivery channels through, the logistics have been good for you, you've ridden that storm as well.
Yeah, we had. In February in China, we were shut down, as the whole of the country was, but we quickly got back up, got our supply chain running, and throughout the year we've delivered to customers as well as anyone can do in this period. So it's been a very challenging time, but we're very proud of the performance we've delivered. Where
are we on COVID now? You're obviously socially distancing, you've got the businesses following the line. What sort of impact has it had on the group?
So all sites are operational. All manufacturing sites and all warehousing sites are operational, focusing on social distancing. And I'm pleased to say the business is running.
And you haven't been furloughing, is that right?
We haven't benefited from any furlough money globally. We haven't made anyone redundant, and we haven't taken any optional government funding.
Well, it's great to hear some good news when obviously many people are in a much worse position. Of course, it all depends on the numbers, Johan. Over to you for some of the top lines on the numbers.
Thank you, Nick. And as Gavin said, we've had a really strong year despite the challenging environment. We report order intake of £258 million, which is up 20% on 2019. And as Gavin had said, that's based on the strength of semi-fab that we've seen throughout the year, as well as the COVID-19 related healthcare demand that we saw. And that translated into revenue of £233 million, which is up 17% on the prior year. And we particularly saw an acceleration in the second half of the year, where we delivered £128 million of revenue, which was up 22% on the first half of the year. And that really just shows the strength of our supply chain and our manufacturing this year, where our Asian factories were able to increase their capacity to nearly double the normal levels in the second half to meet the COVID-19 demand that we saw come through in the first half of 2020.
Okay, so we're going to drill down a bit more into the financials on the sectors in a moment, but thank you very much for introducing us to those numbers. Gavin, obviously we can't not talk about COVID, but it hasn't just been about the health of your people and about logistics and supply chain. There've actually been some changes in trends on the stuff you sell. I mean, obviously we're all working from home a lot. I don't know whether this domestic kind of market has had any impact on you, because you are very involved with medical products and industrial products.
So there's many different factors there. So what has COVID done? I think you're right. The working from home, learning from home, initially drove a lot of the demand in the semi-industry, and we benefited from that. But I think also in healthcare, as you say, it was very polarised. You had products that we sell into that are around the treatment of COVID, and the demand was exceptionally high, and we worked really hard in making sure we fulfilled all those deliveries. But some of the other areas, things like surgical equipment, robotic surgery tools, they were actually down year on year as the world focused on the treatment of COVID. Going forward, we see continued growth in semi, simply because those trends are here to stay, the flexible working, things like that. And also, I think the world has realised we have an inadequate healthcare infrastructure, so we see long-term growth in there. The other factor in industrial, due to customer demand being off, we actually were down year on year, but so we expect that to recover during 2021.
Okay, I asked you if you would be able to sort of underline that by looking at some of the sectors. So that's the kind of the business end of it. Yeah. What does that mean in finances in the sectoral performance?
In terms of finances, our semiconductor manufacturing equipment sector, or semi-fab as we refer to it, grew 86% year over year in terms of revenue. Now, that strength, we started to see some of that towards the end of 2019 as our order intake grew. That strength continued through 2020. In addition to semi-fab, we also had a really strong year in healthcare. Healthcare revenues were up 51% compared to 2019. That was driven by the COVID-19 related demand that we saw in the first half. And then, as Gavin mentioned, our industrial technology sector decreased by about 19% due to those sectors seeing weaker demand in the year, again related somewhat to COVID-19. But it is a sector that we feel will be coming back in 2021.
Gavin, despite the global pandemic, we have a kind of another crisis on the horizon, global warming. We've been talking over the last few years about XP Power's credentials on this point, but from what I gather, you haven't let up on that particular area, the green credentials.
Not at all. I think you're right. If COVID has put a lot of things into people's mind, but I think it's also highlighted the other big impact that you say, impact of global warming. It's something that it's part of our DNA. We started focusing on it in 2009, set up an environmental committee that meets frequently to look at what we can do. Our site in Vietnam, we still think is probably the most environmentally friendly power factory in the world. But the biggest impact we can do is actually by making highly efficient products. So we almost can reduce our customers' Scope 3 emissions, and that's where we've focused. We've reviewed it again in 2020, and we're targeting to be carbon neutral by 2040. Doesn't seem as ambitious as it should be, and we're working on how we can bring that closer.
Johan, we get to the point where we're kind of looking ahead, but also people can expect a dividend after this performance.
Yes, I'm pleased that the board has recommended a Q4 dividend that will be payable in April of this year. It just reflects the confidence that the board and we have in the medium-term prospects of the company.
And as far as the financials are concerned, with everything you and Gavin have told us, we know you can't be absolutely specific. You are a quoted company, but how is the horizon looking from the numbers point of view?
We exit 2020 in a stronger position than we entered it. We have backlog of £125 million, and we have liquidity of £91 million, which is almost double of what it was at the beginning of 2020. This puts us in a really strong financial position. We feel confident about the group's prospects.
Gavin, look ahead time. It's been good news so far. Any challenges on the horizon, but also the positives looking forward?
Look, until we're really out of the COVID crisis, I think there's always going to be challenges of that, and it's been very challenging for our people, and we're very, very mindful of that going forward as well. Mental health is a key area we focus on, so our people is probably our biggest priority. Key opportunities, look, the semi market is strong. It's the outlook looks strong for the rest of 2021. Healthcare is going to normalise, move back away from the treatment of COVID products, and we're expecting recovery in industrial technologies. So we're excited about 2021.
Well, despite the pandemic, you certainly seem to have a reasonable health check here at XP Power. Thank you very much, Gavin Griggs, the new CEO and the acting CFO, Johan Olivier. Thank you very much for walking us through XP Power's results. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.